Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder three? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Welcome to Strange Things with Chris James, broadcasting from the auxiliary radio station for Arkanasa Radio in Laredo, Texas. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Tonight, we're going to be talking about bizarre creatures. Don't forget the Edinburgh Out of This World UFO Conference and Festival is on for April 8th through 10th in Edinburgh, Texas. The open mic night will be on Thursday, April 8th at the Edinburgh Municipal Auditorium, which is right behind Edinburgh City Hall. If you have a story you'd like to tell the world, or you'd just like to hear a few other people talk about what they've seen, be there. It's free and family-oriented. Friday, April 9th, will be the Ufo Festival. Fun for the whole family. They'll be assembling at the Edinburgh City Hall courtyard. You'll be able to meet all of the speakers from the UFO conference, maybe pick up a souvenir or two. Drop by my table. I'll be there selling a few of my books. Remember, books make great Christmas presents. Why wait till December to do your shopping? And get it done early. Saturday, April 10th, will be the UFO conference. The conference this year is going to be held at the Edinburgh Ebony Hills Golf Course, 300 West Palm Drive. It starts at 9 o'clock in the morning and runs till 5 in the evening. Get your tickets now. They're only $25. You can get them at the Dustin Michael Secula Memorial Library, or you can get it at Edinburgh UFO 2021.eventbrite.com. Tickets will be going up the closer to the conference we get, so don't miss out on a good money-saving idea. If you'd like to see who's going to be speaking this year, you can find the whole lineup at edinburghufo.com. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, you can call them at 956-383-6246 or by email at arts@cityofedinburgh.com. There are some folks out there that see things the rest of us don't or can't see. Most people call them schizophrenics. Schizophrenia is a mental disorder characterized by significant alterations in perceptions and thought, mood, and behavior. We have some very colorful people living here in Laredo. Somebody asked me why there are so many homeless in Laredo. There's this big city to our north that has a policy. Anyone found living on the street was to be taken to the bus station and shipped south. It only cost $22, and this made the big city more tourist-friendly. Some of these people are more in love with their mind-altering drugs than working and earning a living. Then there are the ones that should be in a hospital somewhere being treated for their bizarre ideas and activities. They see things we can't see, and sometimes they try to interact with them. There are one or two urban outdoorsmen that have violent tendencies. Working on the bike patrol, we got to meet these people on too many occasions. Not everybody that sees things is crazy. I've seen some things I can't explain, and I'm not really that odd, I hope. It helps that I've managed to run into a few folks who have had similar instances. They've seen the same thing, but on different occasions. Here are a few reports of sightings of monsters and beasts that have been encountered. Now, the witnesses can't all be crazy. Lake Brosno is in the Tver region of Russia. This lake is the home to the Brasno Dragon. The lake is surrounded by eerie abandoned villages and crumbling houses. Few people go to visit this lake. Most say that it feels extremely isolated and creepy, kind of like walking through a cemetery at night, and this is all the time. The lake itself is fairly deep, about 150 feet. Adding to the creepy feel of the place is a sunken church near one side, close to an island. The difficulty in conducting underwater archaeological digs means that it is near impossible to date the building, and anyone who may have known about the church is now long gone. There are a number of species of fish living in Brosno Lake, including perch, pike, and burbot. The lake has well enough fish to feed a large unknown predator. The Brasno Dragon sounds an awful lot like Nessie. Sightings of the creature date back much further, going back to the 13th century. The creature is said to have attacked and killed a group of Mongol horsemen who were launching an attack on Russia. The report is unclear as to whether the men were killed outright by the beast or if it released a cloud of poisonous vapors. There are several different reports. One report does say that all the men and their horses were very much dead. The villagers who found the bodies credited the attack to the dragon. One legend describes an enormous mouth opening in the middle of the lake. The mouth was so big it swallowed a fishing boat along with all the men in it. Another story tells about a group of Vikings that wanted to hide plundered gold and treasure on an island in the lake. The Brasno Dragon emerged from the lake and swallowed the island whole. The report doesn't say whether this was before or after the treasure had been buried. By the 19th century, the sightings had become less interesting sounding, and rather than swallowing entire boats or islands, the Brasno Dragon was described as surfacing late in the evening, but any time anybody tried to get close to it, it would submerge. In the 1940s, the dragon made an appearance when it surfaced next to a German float plane. The monster swallowed the plane and then swam away. The AR-196 was 36 feet long and had a 40-foot wingspan. Anything big enough to swallow it would have to have been huge. Then again, the dragon may have chewed the plane up first and then swallowed the bits. That report was a bit unclear. Today, people say the Brasno Dragon is responsible for capsizing boats, and they blame it for several mysterious disappearances of people. The newspaper, Caravan Ya, local to the region of Lake Brosno, often reports on the legend and visits the lake on occasion, hoping to capture the elusive creature on camera so they can share this with the rest of the world. The Brasno Dragon was so named hundreds of years ago when dinosaurs were not yet well known. The dragon could have been something more like the Loch Ness Monster, or it could be just what people are saying it is, a real live living dragon. Descriptions of the dragon differs from around the world, and so maybe it's what folks say it is. The Chinese dragon doesn't look anything like the European dragon. Investigating the lake is difficult. It is deep and the bottom is covered in broken rocks from seismic fractures. Some believe there's a volcano at the bottom of the lake, which might explain some of the disappearances and why people report seeing smoke out on the lake. If the Brasno Dragon is no more than a mirage, why are there so many reports of sailors being swallowed whole and people being terrified by the mere glimpse of the creature? The naysayers try to explain the dragon away by suggesting the locals are all just superstitious, and for hundreds of years they've been imagining things. Few people live near the lake, and there are hardly any roads running next to it, unlike Loch Ness, which has a highway that runs right next to the water. Researchers that come to look for the Brasno Dragon have to travel a long way, and the lake isn't in a good shape for viewing its length, except if you're in the middle in a boat. It kind of meanders back and forth. No nice, clean, straight shorelines. In the summer of 2002, scientists from Kosmoposk Research Association attempted to find out the truth behind the legend of the Brosno Dragon. The team conducted echo depth sounding and found that there was indeed something in the bottom of the lake. They caught images of a jelly-like mass about the size of a railway car, which hovered around 5.5 feet off the bottom of the lake. Further attempts to identify the mass proved unsuccessful. Legend of the Brosno Lake are very similar to those of the Loch Ness Monster. If there is really a Brosno Dragon, is it a type of huge undocumented freshwater fish? Or a living dinosaur whose species has managed to survive in this one specific location for millions of years? Is there more than one Brosno Dragon, or has it survived on its own for hundreds of years, since the first recorded sighting was in the 13th century? Brosno Lake is far more enigmatic than Loch Ness. The location is in the unforgiving Russian wilderness, and it's miles from the nearest large town. This makes any investigation that much harder. It's not the kind of place that draws a lot of tourism. You either go there because it's your home, or you're there looking for the dragon. The sunken church, which is too dangerous to explore and impossible to excavate, adds to its ambiance. It also lends credence to the theory of a creature being impossible to find or study properly. People know the church is there. They have reported seeing it, and they want to learn more about it, but it's impossible to do that. Looking for a monster in a huge lake that may or may not need to come up for air is just as impossible. What is needed is a system of cameras focused on the lake with people watching from home, like what they have in Loch Ness, so the dragon might be spotted. Excuse me. 1914, German troops had occupied Mons, Belgium. With all the treaties that had been signed over the years between dozens of countries, the British got pulled into the war. As the two sides tried to push each other out, trenches grew up all over the area. The terrain in between the enemy forces became known as no man's land. German troops were content to hold what they had, so they built their trenches into near fortresses. They dug tunnels into the walls for housing, and they made the best of a horrible situation. They had facilities for going to the bathroom that were lined with wallpaper and had paintings on the walls to look at while you were occupied. The British High Command considered the trenches as simply some place to attack from, so all the troops had was a ditch. In an attempt to drive the German army out, the British would attack across no man's land. To soften up the German lines, artillery would bombard the opposite trench, sometimes for days. At a given time, the artillery would cease, and the men would climb out of the trenches and run across the dirt that had now been pulverized by thousands of tons of TNT. With a whole lot of luck, they might manage to survive the mad dash across the muddy, cratered landscape and jump down into the German lines. If enough men managed to stay alive, the Germans might just surrender or escape. This led to the trenches becoming a bizarre haphazard network of interconnecting lines running in all directions. Anyone who was wounded had to either crawl back to their lines or wait for stretcher bearers who would come out once there was a ceasefire announced. Late at night, troops would sneak out to put up barbed wire fencing between the lines. They would also stretch wire along the ground and attach cans so that any enemy movement could be heard. Any sound made in no man's land would be answered by either snipers or sentries shooting in that direction. To stay alive, the men making the trip would remove anything from their uniforms that might make noise. They had to work in total darkness, since any light would also bring in gunfire. Carrying so much equipment, the men would leave their rifles behind, opting for knives and pistols if any were available. To gather intelligence, troops would crawl all the way to within a few feet of the enemy. They would try to listen in on any talking or movement from the enemy. The odds of being shot by either the enemy or your own side was just way too high. November 14th, 1914, Captain Yesick and 4 men from the London Fusiliers were sent out to patrol no man's land. The recon or work squad had to be back home before first light. Just before sunup, on both sides would be massed in their trenches to either attack or repel, depending on the day's plans. If the squad didn't make it back before dawn, they would be written off as either missing or presumed dead. During the first months of the war, once the sun was high in the sky, crews would venture out to no man's land to collect wounded and dead. During one such rescue mission, the stretcher bearers found the remains of the captain and his men. The dead men all looked as if they had been attacked by some kind of a wild animal. The bodies were loaded onto stretchers and taken back to the British lines. With thousands of dead men, no one gave the bodies more than a cursory examination. A dead was dead. Soon after this, another work squad went missing. Once more, the bodies were found with bizarre wounds. Sentries began reporting hearing frightening howls coming from the darkness between the trenches. When a squad was out in the middle, sometimes the night would be rent with screams and sounds of hand-to-hand or hand-to-beast fighting. If the moon was up, a huge dog was seen walking around in no man's land. Over the next 2 years, this huge dog was seen or heard all along the division between the combatants. Every so often, a squad of men would head out into no man's land, never to return. If their bodies were found, they looked as if a huge dog had attacked them. The sentries began shooting at this huge dog, but the bullets had no effect on it. As the war raged on, the rescue crews were no longer safe during the day. Soldiers on both sides began shooting at anyone who even tried to move from their trench. Movement of any kind brought immediate gunfire. In 1919, Canadian Captain Newhouse described this gigantic otherworldly hound that mauled British soldiers in no man's land. His story said that this hound wasn't your typical hellhound or phantom, but it was an intelligent creation of a horrific German experiment. According to Newhouse, Dr. Gottlieb Hochmeier had been performing experiments to develop a powerful weapon that would sway the war in Germany's favor. Hochmuller focused his attention on insane asylums, looking for the right kind of men for the job. Once he had acquired enough men with a certain penchant for cunning and killing, he took his patients to a secret lab for upgrade, like the Cybermen. The men had their brains removed, and these were placed into the skulls of giant hounds. Just about every one of these half-breeds died from all manners of complications. One is believed to have survived. Once this man-dog was well enough, it was set loose on the battlefields with its intense hatred of the British. The hound sought out only those from the other side. There were no reports of any German troops ever being attacked by this man-dog. This creature roamed no man's land, king of his domain, for 2 years. At some point in the carnage, somebody noticed the attacks on the patrols had stopped. Those sent out to repair the fences or gather information only had to worry about gunfire or bombs or running into enemy patrols. The beast was no longer there. Nobody knows where it got to, or if maybe it had died from something. Neuhaus said that certain secret papers had been released from Hockmüller's home which proved this legend. Like many things those in charge want kept secret, the papers vanished into some vault in some government office. Also during World War I, November 23, 1915, the British steamer Iberian was cruising off the coast of Ireland when it was attacked by a German submarine, U-28. The Iberian tried to make a run for it, but the U-28 began firing shells from its deck gun. Torpedoes cost a lot of money, and they were saved for convoys where surfacing was just too dangerous. After taking 2 direct hits, the Iberian began to take on water and slowly slip below the waves. The sinking would be all but forgotten, just one more ship lost in the war, if not for the article that the U-28 captains Baron von Forstner wrote for the German newspaper in 1933. In the Baron's account, he stood on the submarine's conning tower and watched the steamer sink. About 25 seconds after it disappeared beneath the surface, there was a huge explosion, probably caused by the ship's boiler detonating. This blast brought a mysterious sea creature clear up out of the water. The animal was about 65 feet long, and it looked like a crocodile. It had pairs of strong front and hind legs, adopted for swimming, and a long head that tapered towards the nose. According to the Baron, the creature was visible for about 10 to 15 seconds at a distance of about 300 to 500 feet. It was a bright sunny day. The Belgian zoologist Bernard Havelmans, who coined the term cryptozoology and produced influential books on sea serpents, considered the U-28 sighting one of the 4 most reliable in history. The incident was especially interesting since the explosion lifted the animal all the way out of the water, allowing the Baron to see its entire body. Based on his description, Havelman speculated that the creature might have been a surviving species of Thalattosuchia, a genus of giant sea crocodile from the time of the dinosaurs. According to the captain's account, 7 other crew members manning the deck gun witnessed this creature. Unfortunately, 6 of them died when the U-28 was sunk in 1917. The only other survivor was the sub's cook, Robert Maas, who never wrote about the incident, leaving the story to rely on von Forstner's account alone. The 61 men who survived the Iberian didn't see the creature. They had all been a bit busy trying to stay alive at the time and didn't have much time to look around for sea monsters. The Eureka Monster is said to be a large surviving member of Dromaeosauridae, that inhabit the vast Atacama Desert in Chile. It has been described as looking like a cross between a dromaeosaur and a kangaroo. Various motorists driving the main road linking Iquique and Eureka have reported a 6-foot-tall, sharp-toothed bipedal dinosaur crossing the road in front of them or sometimes running alongside them. Once the creature has moved on, it leaves behind 3-toed footprints characteristic of that of primitive dinosaurs, kangaroos, or even emu. In some instances, it is described as a dinosaur-looking bird. In 2004, several members of a large family saw what they described as a bunch of dog-faced kangaroo-like creatures that ran around their vehicle as they made their way home to Eureka. Several times in 2004, other people reported seeing this creature. Sometimes it would be one by itself, and other times they would see entire groups of them. There are many possibilities of what this animal could be. It could be a living dinosaur, or possibly some of the other unique prehistoric fauna that lived in South America, such as the Phorosauricus. The Phorosauricus is an extinct genus of giant flightless terror birds that inhabited Argentina during the Miocene era. Phorosauricus was one of the dominant land predators in South America at the time of its existence. Since the Atacama Desert is so vast and it can barely support the few animals that live there, most people say that this is just a hoax. Others say there could be some unknown creature, or maybe several, living around the edges of the desert that venture into the wasteland on occasion. The Eureka Monster was first spotted in the Atacama Desert in Chile in 1980. Witnesses described a run-in with a huge kangaroo-like bipedal monster in the desert. The sightings have occurred by people who are traveling by car in different days through the remote road that links the cities of Eureka and Iquique. Too many Q's in that word. Iquique and Eureka through the Atacama Desert, some 1,240 miles south of Santiago, Chile. The newspapers in those cities collect recent accounts from citizens who claim to have seen this rare creature. In addition, a military officer named Hernan Cuevas says that he spotted 2 of the beasts while traveling with 2 other adults and 2 children in his vehicle. He was quoted as saying, "A huge beast, much like a 2-legged dinosaur, with huge, thick thighs." Almost sounds like a T-Rex. They described the animal as being exactly like the raptors from Jurassic Park. In this case, it's said to be a living dromaeosauridae. This particular desert is of great interest in itself, as it is considered the driest place on the surface of our planet. Although water can be found, it's only where you can only find it if you know where to look. South America has provided us with all manner of fossils from the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, and Chile is no exception. Could there be an ancient species that somehow managed to survive extinction and lives on in this inhospitable desert? A lot of people are under the impression that the Himalayan Yeti lives way up on top of snow-covered mountains, probably because of that famous Shipton photograph. The locals say that Yeti lives in the uninhabited areas with trees and brush well below the snow-covered mountains. It ventures much higher for some unknown reason. Could it be that these creatures spotted in the Atacama Desert live on the outskirts, but they're only seen when they venture into the interior? They don't have to live there, that's where they're seen at. And on that note, I am going to take a brief pause and drink some coffee, and hopefully Roswell will stay off the desk now. She's been hollering her head off the last couple of minutes. Don't go away, we'll be right back after this. Did you stay up all night watching horror movies and now you think your house might be haunted? Contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society and have them come by and check out your house. Maybe you accidentally invited a ghost or a spirit, or maybe it's just the plumbing. You can contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. I had no idea what I was missing until I had my eyes checked at the Optica del Norte 107 Calle del Norte. Now I can see all kinds of things I've been missing my entire life. You should get your eyes checked too. Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. Isn't it about time you did something for your skin besides mistreat it? Contact Lourdes James at 956-723-3019 and take care of your skin with a free skincare class. Yep, for some odd reason, Roswell just loves to get up on the desk when I'm trying to do a show, and she doesn't just lay in one spot, but she walks back and forth and tries to knock things off the desk, and if only she would behave a little better, I wouldn't... Uh-oh, now she's trying to throw up on something. I hate it when that happens. Man. Okay, that's the life with cats, I guess you could say. Ah, there she goes. Oh, right on my desk. Dang it. Now I got to clean that up. The Burrinjor is also known as the Bunosaur. It's an Australian dinosaur cryptid that resembles a theropod dinosaur that we known as T-Rex. Ah, there. Get off my desk. Oh, she threw up on an electronic component. I better clean that up before it gets bad. Ugh. Darn cat. The Burrinjor, also known as the Bunosaur, is an Australian dinosaur cryptid that resembles the theropod dinosaur that we known as T-Rex. But maybe it's a descendant of a Megaraptor or simply the raptor, like the creature from Jurassic Park. It could also be a dinosaur that has so far not appeared in the fossil record. The Burrinjor is described as being a giant lizard according to the Aboriginal mythology. Based on sightings, it is 20 to 25 feet long, has small clawed hands, and is bipedal in nature. Throughout the 1950s, Australian cattle ranchers reported a large creature leaving 2 footprints, tracks, was eating their livestock. Also earlier, Aboriginal accounts suggest that it is a reptilian animal, possibly with feathers, whose diet consisted of kangaroos and other large animals. If it was not for the bipedal footprint findings, the Burrinjor could have been mistaken for a Megalodania, a prehistoric giant monitor lizard that lived in the area more recently, based on the Aboriginal descriptions. The last sighting of the Burrinjor happened in 1985 when a family was traveling to Roper River and they reported seeing a 20-foot-long monster covered in feathers. Another report tells of a man named Brian Clark who went into the woods and got lost sometime in 1978. After the alarm was raised, he was tracked by policemen and two Aboriginal bushmen. The trackers woke up one night to a loud, thunderous sound and the ground shaking under their feet. After finding the wayward traveler, police later told the man if he ever went back into the woods and got lost, they were not coming looking for him. Some think the sound was the stomping of the Beringer. However, it's a light-footed theropod dinosaur and would not have crashed around the undergrowth in this manner, despite what certain movies have made public believe. There have been no sightings of this creature in more than 30 years. At least no one that has seen it has come forward to tell about it. Oh, and nobody that's seen it didn't survive to tell about it. This has led many to think that if it once existed, it has since become extinct. But they have found no remains. More recently, the Beringer has been one of several living dinosaurs to be held up by proponents of the young Earth creationism as evidence of their belief. Now, these are the folks that think that the Earth is only several thousand years old and that the dinosaurs were here much more recent than what the scientists say. People have managed to make casts of huge three-toed tracks, some nearly 3 feet long and wide. Now, an emu and a kangaroo is a really big bird, but their feet are not 3 feet wide. The Australian brush is so vast with no visitors that all kinds of beasts could be hiding there that we may never see. Now, these next couple are out of the Congo, and they've got some really exotic names. I'm going to do my best to pronounce them, but even having heard the proper pronunciation, I'm still going to stumble over these names for sure. There's too many consonants without nearly enough vowels. Naguma Monini is a cryptid living in the Republic of Congo, described as being like a large lizard with a serrated ridge on its back. It could be related to the Mokele-mbembe, as they both come from the same background and they both resemble prehistoric animals. The 3 testimonials of sighting exist that took place near the Dangu Mataba in the Congo. The first one was in 1961. The reporting person didn't want their name mentioned. The second was 10 years later, 1971, by Pastor Joseph Ellis. He estimated the length of the tail part as 32 feet long, equal to the length of his dugout canoe. No neck or head could be seen. The diameter looked to be about 3 feet across. The creature was described as being grayish-brown. Once he was once he was back in the village, it appeared that the subject was taboo to talk about. These and other sightings were gathered by the University of Chicago biologist Ray P. Mackle, who led 2 expeditions to the Lakula Swamp in the Republic of Congo while searching for Mokele-mbembe. Mackle concluded that the animal has a low-slung body and therefore is more like a lizard than a snake, since it never raises itself sufficiently once it leaves the water. Mackle also noted that the animal's triangular or diamond-shaped ridges were similar but not exactly like those of Mokele-mbembe or Mbulu Umbulu Umbulu, or the animal with planks growing out of its back. That's how it's spelled, Umbulu Umbulu Umbulu. Which is translated as the creature with planks growing out of his back, which is an aquatic-based cryptid that sounds an awful lot like a stegosaurus, living in the Lakula region. Possibly this is the same animal being described in the 1958 book On the Track of the Unknown Animals by Bernard Hovelmans. In 1928, a snake-like animal called Galuka Badigu yeah, let's call him the Badigu, was reported in the Ubangi Shari area. This report was made by Game Inspector Lucian Blanco, who later, 1954, also first reported the Emila Nkuga. According to his report, this creature killed a hippo in the Bracachua River without leaving any signs of wounds. It also crushed the vegetation in a field, leaving tracks 3 to 5 feet wide. Similar reports from 1932 and 34 exist, in which it is called the Diba, the Sango, the Marunangu, and the Badigu. Darn, I wish the people in Africa would learn to speak English. I know, it's their country, but still. A lot of them speak Dutch. And a lot of people don't realize that because the Dutch once owned South Africa. 1934 report, an old man had come to see Blanco as he was told that he showed interest in these bizarre animals. The old man narrated that in about 1890 he was fishing in the Kibi stream and he saw the Badigu eating from a tree. He described the neck to be as thick as a man's thigh, and the underneath of the neck was a lighter color. He could not see the whole body, only about 24 feet of the neck. He also said it does not frequent places where you'll find hippos, or it will kill them. Finally, in 1945, the animal's tracks were spotted near Ndeli, and Blanco's gun carrier also saw them. And back in the day when they had people like that, they had folks that would carry their rifle for them. Those things can get heavy after a long time, so must have been nice. Anyway, it is believed by some people to have been a living dinosaur, most likely a Spinosaurid, a genera of rather gigantic crocodile like theropods that dwelled on riverside, rainforest, coastal, and delta habitats that hunted any kind of a prey that was available. This could have been a relative of the creature spotted by Captain Farsner. If Naguma Monini is a giant member of the Spinosaur family, this would be an amazing discovery. Naguma Monini also described to be quite similar to the early land animal Dimetrodon. It has also been said that it may be an elongated monitor lizard. The Badigu sightings may refer to a creature similar to Mokele Mbembe. This is because this giant also kills hippopotamuses, but is a vegetarian. North Carolina, thank God I'm out of Africa. Too many weird names and sounds and words. North Carolina has its share of bizarre creatures. Cryptids living in the area include Bigfoot, Lake Norman Monster, and the lizard men. There have also been a few pterosaurs seen flying around in North Carolina. Pterosaurs were flying reptiles that many scientists believe went extinct a long time ago. Many, but not all. A cryptozoologist, Jonathan Whitcomb, author of the book Modern Pterosaurs, published an article about the creatures, including new pterodactyl sightings in North Carolina. He said, "My associates and I believe these are non-extinct pterosaurs, what many people would call pterodactyls or flying dinosaurs." Cynthia Lee was studying to become a veterinarian technician, and she reported to Whitcomb a pterosaur sighting that she had January 4th in Raleigh. She was sure that the flying creature did not have any feathers, but it did have a long tail with a diamond-shaped bulb at the end of it. She also said it looked like the head had a crest. Many paleontologists say that pterosaurs were covered in feathers. As time went by, they became modern birds. Lee was on her way to work when she saw the same crested creature out of the window of the car she was riding in. The driver didn't see it. Cynthia said she's not the only member of her family to have seen flying dinosaurs. As she said, her mother and her uncle saw one while they were playing outside of her grandmother's house when they were young. They told their grandmother, but she didn't believe it. Cynthia said she always thought they were extinct until she saw one for herself, and now she thinks that the pterosaurs are still out there somewhere. In Charlotte, North Carolina, a man and his cousin saw something he immediately said was a dragon. He watched it for a while, and after a closer observation, he decided it was a flying dinosaur or a pterodactyl. The man said it looked like what I've seen in Jurassic Park movies. In Asheville, North Carolina, a lady saw a huge black-winged creature flying very low over her car. It had no feathers, but it had very sharp edges to its features. At Jacksonville, North Carolina, an eyewitness saw something huge flying in the sky. It looked like a pale greenish white, and it had smooth skin. It didn't appear to have any feathers, and it had a tail with a diamond shape on the very end. North Carolina is considered by many cryptozoologists to be one of America's 7 pterosaur hotspots. Whitcomb also wrote an extensive article on livepterosaurs.com, which includes several additional North Carolina sightings. For $50, you can buy a drone that looks like a pterosaur. A lot, but not exactly. The drone also makes enough noise if you listen, you'll be able to hear it flying. So, if you spot a flying dinosaur, look close to see if it has any rotors on it, and listen for that buzzing sound it will make. Matt Cartmill, a professor emeritus of evolutionary anthropology at Duke University, said that it is not impossible for there to be living pterosaurs today. In Missouri, they call it the gollywampus. In Arkansas, it's the whistling wampus. And in the Appalachian, it is just simply the wampus or the wampus cat. Half dog, half cat, this creature can run on 2 legs or down on all 4s. Most sightings are just after dark or just before dawn, all throughout the Appalachians. In most cultures, the wampus cat is a howling, evil creature with yellow eyes that can pierce the hearts and souls of those unfortunate enough to cross its path, driving them mad. A Cherokee folklore is filled with tales of evil spirits lurking in the deep, dark forests that surround their villages. They have a little different view of the wampus cat. The creature was an evil spirit called the Iwa, the spirit of madness, and had been terrorizing the village of Etowah in North Carolina. The village shaman and chiefs called for a meeting. The shaman told the chiefs that sending the braves to try and hunt and kill the Iwa was surely going to be the end of the tribe, for the Iwa had a terrible power to drive men mad at a glance. If they sent all of their braves out into the forest, none of them would come back with their facilities still intact. The chiefs argued that the Iwa could no longer be allowed to prey upon their children. Something had to be done. They discussed back and forth what they were going to do, and finally they decided that it would be best to send the strongest, bravest man in the village who would go and hunt down the Iwa and kill it. A standing bear was the strongest, fastest, sneakiest, smartest, and most respected brave in all of the Cherokee Nation. He was chosen to do battle with the demon. As he left the village, the shaman all gathered and blessed him, and the chiefs handed him many weapons to defeat the beast. Several weeks went by, and there was no word from Standing Bear. Late one night, the stricken brave came running back into the camp, screaming and clawing at his eyes. He never fully recovered from his encounter with the Wampus Cat. His wife, Running Deer, went to the shaman and they gave her a booger mask, which is a bobcat's face, and they told her that the spirit of the mountain cat could stand against the Iwa, but she must be the one to surprise the demon. The chiefs gave her special black paste, which when rubbed on her body would hide her scent as well as her body. Now, I know this is a legend, but why didn't they give the mask to Standing Bear? Makes you wonder. Maybe they didn't really like the guy. Running Deer snuck through the woods until she found the Wampus Cat. She was able to get close enough to it that it didn't know she was there until she attacked. Jumping in front of the Wampus Cat, Running Deer got right in his face. The mask turned Wampus Cat's magic back on him, and he was the one driven insane. When she arrived back home, the chiefs declared Running Deer the spirit talker and home protector. Some say that the spirit of Running Deer inhabits the Wampus Cat and that she continues her eternal mission of watching her tribe's land to protect them and their people from the demons that hide in the dark. I heard a few, not many, but a few stories about the Wampus Cat from my grandmother years and years ago, but I would be hard set to repeat them today. I only remember her talking about that creature, the Wampus Cat. Cool name. In the Pacific Theater of World War II, troops reported witnessing peculiar flying humanoids. Described as possessing a pair of leathery wings like a bat, these creatures were said to have been spotted close to military installations on numerous occasions. As silent and reclusive as they were reported to be, military eyewitnesses said they felt as if the unearthly beings were observing them. The humanoids would stand in the distance watching as the men went about their daily duties. Many of the sightings date to around the time of the Battle of Okinawa in 1945. To me, this sounds an awful lot like the Mothman sightings, a creature hanging around just before some violent occurrence. Years afterwards, reports of flying humanoids in the Pacific were still being made by soldiers. A Private Sinclair, the U.S. Air Force, was on guard duty at Camp Okubo near Kyoto, Japan in 1952. At first, he heard what sounded like something huge flying through the air. He at first thought this was simply a giant bird of some kind. As the giant bird flew closer, the private got to see the details. It became clear that this was no bird. This creature had the body of a 7-foot-tall man with an enormous wingspan. The creature hovered in the air over the private's head, looking down at him as if seeing what the man was doing, or perhaps looking for some food. Taylor freaked out and began firing his weapon at the flying creature. Instead of flying away, the birdman vanished from sight. There was no blood or any indication that the bullets had found their mark. Taylor was not the only witness to this creature. When he reported the incident to his sergeant, it was revealed that another guard had witnessed the exact same creature the year before. Private Taylor had no knowledge of the previous sightings and had no contact with the other eyewitness. The two descriptions of the winged creature were practically the same. What Taylor could have seen is still being kicked around. Some say it was simply a huge crow. I've seen some big crows in my time, and never one with a 7-foot body. This, combined with the idea that a man armed with a rifle would be freaked out by a big crow, just sounds wrong to me. Flying humanoids have been seen all over the world, and I believe there's something more to it than just misidentification. Perhaps I'll have to do another show about flying humanoids. If I'm lucky, maybe I can get Ken Gerhard on to tell about his book. The last time I had Ken on, we had all kinds of problems with the recording, so There's something about getting Ken on the show. Technical problems just crop up like mad. Anyway, maybe I'll just talk to him and I'll repeat what he says. Throughout the Vietnam War, the fighters on both sides of the conflict regularly encountered large bipedal apes in the dense jungle. There are no giant apes. Well, there are hardly any apes at all living in Vietnam. Even before the war began, the jungles of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia have had stories of huge man-apes that were considered to be dangerous. Various names were assigned to these creatures by the local people, including Batutut, Ujit, or the Forest People. Particularly cited within the Vu Quang Nature Preserve, such stories described muscular bipedal beings with ape-like features, 6 feet tall and covered in reddish-brown hair. A common reported trait of the forest people is their display of boldness and, on occasion, aggression. Now, doesn't that sound an awful lot like Bigfoot? In Borneo, where the creatures are also reported to exist, witnesses state that they do occasionally kill humans. The locals of these regions consider the creature to be a fact of life, but the Batutut was relatively unknown to the outside world. It wasn't until U.S. soldiers began running into these forest people that the stories came out to the rest of us. Among American soldiers, the creatures were known as rock apes because of their propensity to hurl rocks at the soldiers. In the decades after the Vietnam War, veterans' testimonies are coming out of encounters with these creatures. An airborne squad leader in the 101st Airborne, serving from 68 to 69, described seeing numerous brown and reddish-brown rock apes around the Ashwa Valley. Although sightings of the creature were common, they were seldom fired at because the patrols were trying to maintain silence to obtain an intel. Noise and light discipline is the only way to move around enemy territory unless you have an armored division in support. According to the eyewitness, command wanted confirmed body counts, not mysterious creature sightings. Many rock ape sightings went unreported at the time. Michael Kelly, who served 1969 to 70, also spotted these jungle people. In 2000, he described how 8 rock apes surprised a squad of his while they were on patrol, resulting in a one-sided firefight being launched against the creatures. The patrol was moving through the jungle when one of the rock apes was spotted. The point man thought he was looking at the enemy, so he opened up on it. When the point man started shooting, this meant everybody joined in. The soldiers fired in all directions, thinking they had walked into an ambush. Kelly said, all except one was light brown to reddish brown in color and about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. One dark, almost black male remained fighting, protecting the others as they retreated. He was running through the branches and rushing the men with its teeth bared. In my unit, we had a few men who had served in Vietnam. Most of the time, they never talked about what they'd seen, but on a few occasions I would hear somebody say something about the rock ape, to which others who had been there would chime in with mumbled conversations. Those of us not there were always left out, catching only a few words and phrases. I did hear rock ape said by several men. A relatively recent report of a wartime monster sighting comes from a Special Forces member who was tracking a Taliban person of interest in the mountains of Afghanistan. The squad's objective was to observe a village for several days in the hopes of catching sight of the person they were tracking and uncovering some actionable intel. The team comprised 6 men at the base and 2 others whose job it was to observe the village at closer quarters. LPOP, as it were. Right from the get-go, they began experiencing radio problems. They wrote this off as being caused by some magnetic properties of the rocks around them. Communications are just about always a huge problem. In an attempt to rectify the commo problem, several soldiers tried moving their radio equipment. It was around dusk at the time. As they neared the SATCOM, one of the soldiers spotted a man in a white robe running through the rocks outside the village. Lacking reliable communication and worried about the mission being compromised, the men packed up their equipment and headed back to camp. It was best to pack up and get out of there rather than stay and possibly find themselves in a firefight. They made their way back to camp, being sure to brush out their tracks. They were all on high alert as they trekked back to their outpost. This is what we call extreme pucker factor. As they moved, the rear guard kept catching sight of some mysterious white-clad figure following them. The sense of urgency and panic increased. They were a small unit, completely exposed, without the means of communication. Not only that, the witness reports that everything felt strange. The air was heavy. The silence felt as if it was humming. If you've never been in a really quiet location, it sounds like the air is humming. Once the sun was down, the team put on their night vision goggles. With the world cast in a green haze, they scouted their surroundings. The men could see nothing and no one moving behind them. At first all was quiet, but then the night was shattered by what sounded like some kind of an aircraft taking off. It got so loud the men had to yell to be heard. That's when the men spotted what looked like hundreds of pairs of eyes looking at them from all around the mountain. Any time one of the men tried to focus on the eyes, they would vanish, only to reappear someplace else. If you've never used night vision goggles, eyes don't glow when seen through NVGs. Since the eyes are exposed to the darkness, they dilate. This gives people a weird black-eyed look instead. The soldiers had no idea what they were seeing or why the eyes seemed to glow. It looked as if the squad was about to have to fight for their lives, so they dug in and tried to set up hasty fighting positions. In the blink of an eye, it got quiet and still. The stillness you experience when bad things are about to happen. The men all stopped digging and tried to see or hear anything that would tell them what was going on around them. They sat dead still for about 10 minutes. With no enemy to fend off, the squad decided to get back to camp where they could at least have a few more men and a lot more ammo. They moved quickly through the scrub until they were met by the sight of a man dressed in light-colored robes. The man was slowly making his way towards them. According to the witness, the way that he moved was unnatural. He seemed to pass through any obstacles in his way as though they were made of thin air. He seemed to melt over and around the rocks. Through the night vision goggles, the witness stared straight at the man walking towards him. In the NVGs, the man walked as if he could see in the dark even without any kind of vision device. The man stopped, raised one arm in the air. It looked as if he could see the soldiers observing him. The arm didn't look right. It looked more like some kind of an alien extension that just didn't belong to a human. Just as the soldier was about to let his companions know about this weird man, he vanished. 1 second he's there, and the next gone. After he disappeared, the squad was able to move out and get back to their camp. According to the witness, the village they'd been observing was raided later that night. The team that moved into the village found it completely abandoned. They also found several bodies in the area where the squad had seen the lights earlier. The corpses had been ripped to shreds. There was far more blood on the ground than could have come from just the few bodies. It looked as if some of the dead had been carried off for some unknown, probably best not known, reason. The official report said the village had been successfully taken down by the U.S. soldiers. There was no mention of any otherworldly activities. No one knew or wanted to guess what had killed the men in the village. It looked as if some monster had gone through, killing everyone in the dark. The biggest question was, why had the strange man waved at the soldier hiding there in the dark? Why was he, or it, friendly towards the Americans and not the villagers? In wartime, or when you're in a hostile environment, your senses are heightened. You pay close attention to small things you'd normally ignore. When your life might be on the line, you will pay attention to every little thing. This can make the difference between going home at the end of the shift or being carried away in a bag. Why do so many people go by the mantra that monsters can't be real? They try to convince themselves anyone who sees or reports seeing anything unexplainable must be either nuts or lying. I think they do this to make their lives a little less scary. If monsters were real, then these folks would have to lock themselves in their house and hide under their beds. If you have a true story, something weird or scary or unexplainable that happened to you or your family or even a close friend, let me know and I'll put it in my next book, Paranormal Stories. You can contact me at strangethings@arkanasa.com. Just send me whatever details you have, and I'll write it up in a readable form, and then I will send you back the draft so you can okay it, or you can say, no, that's not quite what I saw or heard. Let me know what you've got, and I'll put it in the book. If you have any suggestions for another show, you can contact me at the same address, strangethings@arkanasa.com. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder 3? Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.